and making sure that at the time we launch, it will allow us to get to the space station on time and accurately. So you can see on your right screen, Bob and Doug are patiently waiting. They do still have their visors on and still strapped into their seats. The launch escape system is still armed right now as we are offloading fuel and will not disarm until prop offload is complete. And this is just to ensure the safety of Bob and Doug and make sure that they can egress safely from the rocket.
And just a reminder, today, just this first attempt, we're going to be right back here looking like on Saturday for attempt number 2. Launch America is not going anywhere. Still on the track to get Bob and Doug into space and get this Crew Dragon up to the International Space Station. So it's always good. If you're going to scrub, probably rather scrub for weather than an issue on either Falcon 9 or Dragon. And we weren't tracking any issues with the flight systems throughout our countdown today. Everything passed with leak checks on the hatches and the crew suits. All the communications working great. All the teams were ready to go. So as John and I said, always nice to have a little bit more practice, and we'll be right back at it on Saturday.
What would this launch be if it wasn't even more exciting to try and launch today, and now we have to push it to Saturday?
Really got to build the suspense.
Yes. So.
Hey, Dan and Jesse. Another thought crossed my mind while I'm watching the diagram here showing fuel is just about off. First and second stage, we're down under 10%. LOX is also just about off of first
under
stage.
10%.
Yep, we're getting the announcement.
Stage 2 fuels roughly 20%.
Stage 2 fuels at 20%. Stage 1 LOX is under 10%. So just continuing to come off of the vehicle as expected. On the monitor, Bob and Doug continue with visors down. Their launch escape system is armed, as we've mentioned. If there is anything that were happen to go wrong right now, they still have the viable pad abort means, something that we demonstrated way back in 2015 on one of these webcasts when we fired the Dragon capsule using the 8 Super Dracos off of the launch pad and it splashed down offshore in the Atlantic Ocean. So they're staying there with the system armed until all the hazards are essentially removed and we bring the crew access arm around them. We're standing by a minute. We're going to listen to launch director talking to the weather officer.
If you're just now tuning in, we did not launch today. We did have a scrub because of weather, but as we were saying, we are looking forward to trying this again on Saturday. Our launch time on Saturday will be another instantaneous window, so we'll have to have the weather cooperate again, and that launch time will be at 3:22 p.m. Eastern. I think our last weather update put us at about 40% probability of violation. John and I can check me real quick.
Yeah, Dan, what I saw coming out of the Air Force was 40% probability of violation, I believe. It's always tough because they report in terms of violation, and the optimists have to subtract that from 100% to go, hey, 60% chance, I'll plan my picnic. We were listening, the SpaceX launch director, Mike Taylor, was talking to the launch weather officer asking about the 3 criteria that scrubbed us today. It sounds like in another minute or two, the lightning and the attached anvil cloud rules will clear. The field mill rule, charge in the atmosphere, is still bouncing around, and so, hey, we may need several more minutes before that one would clear. So we'd need even longer than 10 minutes in the window today, it looks like, for all the rules to clear. That brings up what I wanted to mention a little while ago. I got lost listening to the weather brief. But there are a lot of folks who are going, why an instantaneous launch window for Falcon 9 and Dragon? Now, typically when we go to the space station, when we do the mission planning, it's an instantaneous window. There may be enough performance in the rocket to launch somewhere in a 5-minute period, but you've got to pick a time in there. But in the case of Falcon 9, once we start propellant load at T-minus 35 minutes, it doesn't matter so much if you can move 5 or 10 minutes left or right, because the whole sequence is scripted. We do the flight analysis assuming that the temperatures of the propellants are below a certain amount so that we know how much performance is available to the rocket, how much margin we're going to have. So essentially, if you start the countdown, 4 hours, 8 hours out like we were doing today, and you have a very short window, once you get into propellant loading at T-minus 35 minutes, you have to go as soon as you get to zero. We don't have the ability to stop the countdown, wait 5 minutes. Now all of a sudden the liquid oxygen starts warming up from 340 degrees below zero in the ground system, and that changes how much performance you get carrying into orbit, and we don't want to cut into those margins. Now, if we had had something like a 4-hour window, which some communication satellites have, we could actually get down to almost zero, hold the count, detank the Falcon 9, wait a while, it takes us about an hour and a half, reload a whole new batch of cold liquid oxygen and fuel from the big storage tank that we've got there at Pad 39A, and try to launch again. But in that case, you have to be able to launch, about an hour and a half or so later after you scrub. And in the case of the International Space Station, an hour and a half from now, it's nowhere near where we need to be to get to orbit with the performance of the Falcon 9 and the Dragon. So today, it's a combination. We start the day with a 1-second window.
Yeah, just informing you, it's
but
been
once
2
we
hours,
get inside of 35 minutes, it becomes an instantaneous window for the Falcon 9, regardless of what the customer may be able to give us. So there's a little explanation for folks who are wondering why we have such a tight window. Right now, it looks like we are bringing the last bits of fuel off the stage, and liquid oxygen is just about off of the stage. So things are clocking right along per the 40-minute timeline. Everything looks good, and we'll wait to hear that we're clear, and then when we get the call for Bob and Doug to go ahead and disarm launch escape system, and the crew access arm will watch come back out, center itself around the Dragon hatch, and then the ingress team will go up there and open the hatch.
Thank you for the science lesson, John I.
Hey, no charge.
Much appreciated.
We did hear a quick call to the crew there. We should be just under 10 minutes away from that prop offload completing. It looks like we're just tracking
Stage 2
the
fuel offload
RP1
is complete.
And there we have the confirmation. Stage 2 offload's complete, and we should have now just the RP1, so that densified propellant, or the RP1 is kerosene. We should be under 10%, a little under 10 minutes until that's off. And then we'll step through those events we were discussing, where they'll be able to disarm the launch escape system, get the arm back out there, and Bob and Doug can begin to exit the Dragon spacecraft. Still not the friendliest skies in the background.
That is Florida, though. The weather is constantly changing over there, which is why we always have to keep an eye on it through every single launch that we have out there. And Bob and Doug are patiently waiting. As you can see, that is a live view of them on the Crew Dragon vehicle as they're waiting prop offload to complete. Second stage prop offload is complete. We are just waiting on first stage to
Stage 1
complete.
box offload is complete. Waiting on Stage 1 fuel.
And again, the launch escape system is still armed. We are waiting for a prop offload to complete before they disarm that, and then they will be able to egress from the Crew Dragon vehicle.
We just heard we should be just under 5 minutes away from the last of that fuel coming out of the Falcon 9 first stage, and then we'll see those events start to pick back up, and we'll see the crew arm swing back out. They've been in those seats for a couple hours now. They typically get inside of Dragon a little over 2.5 hours ahead of launch. So they've been strapped into these seats for quite a while. They are custom sized though, so they're as comfortable and as snug as possible. Obviously, since they're going to be in them for a really long time, but most importantly, when you're doing that splashdown at the very end of the mission, it's your car seat, and splashing down or landing on land is not the most gentle of procedures in a capsule. So just really making sure that they're snug inside of that Dragon capsule. But we should be a little under 5 minutes away from the prop offload being completed.
And as Dan mentioned, those suits are custom made, but the seats are also custom fit for each astronaut as well. They do remain on Crew Dragon for this mission for almost 24 hours so we do want to make sure that they are comfortable and make sure that the suits and the seats are comfortable enough for them to stay in that position for a while. I believe when they get into orbit, they are allowed to get out of their seats and get a little bit more comfortable, but it's a long ride for them.
Yeah, once they do get on orbit, they are able to get out of the seats and actually out of their suits too, since for this flight path today, it was going to take them about 19 hours. So Bob and Doug would actually have had about 8 hours to sleep on board the Dragon capsule. So we weren't able to launch today, though. The rendezvous on Saturday should be very similar to what we would have had if we launched today, where it'll take them about 19 hours to get to the International Space Station. So they'll launch, and they'll have a number of different events that we'll be able to walk you through, including manual piloting of Dragon and just really putting the spacecraft through all of the paces before it arrives at the International Space Station. Because again, this is a test flight, and this is this last test before we certify the Dragon spacecraft for regular crewed flights, which will just be bringing up those long duration, 6-month, maybe even a year-long missions.
Right. And it should be a very exciting test flight because it's pretty much like an actual mission. When Bob and Doug get on the station, they will be performing some research while they're up there and performing tests and doing some final things for this demonstration mission.
Yeah, but I mean, just for right now, we are just going to continue to stay with them until we see them come out of Dragon, because the launch escape system's still armed while we wait for this propellant offload to complete. That's just done as a safety measure. Anytime you have rocket propellants beneath you, you want to make sure that we have a good way for them to get out of the way. And so we should be within just a couple of minutes for that final bit of RP1 coming off the first stage, and then we'll hear the crew get the go to disarm that launch escape system. We'll see the crew access arm swing back in. But if you're just tuning in, expecting them to be in space, we did have a scrub today due to weather. Our next launch attempt is going to be this Saturday, May 30th at 3:22 p.m. Eastern Time. And just like we did today, we're going to be bringing you every single step of the way. It's going to look a little familiar if you watched all of today's, but it's going to be just as exciting.
I can imagine it might even be more exciting with all the anticipation that we've hyped this launch up for with already going through it all today. But again, the more practice we have, the better off we will be. Hopefully next launch attempt we will have a flawless launch and actually be able to lift off with good weather.
Yeah, weather is going to be the big thing that we'll continue to watch. That was the culprit today for our scrub. And our initial weather reports already looking at about a 40% probability of violation. So as John and I was saying, the optimists in us have to say that's 60% good. So we're gonna look at the good side of this, and that's roughly what we were in the days leading up to this. We won't have a rogue tropical storm forming off of South Carolina on us on Saturday, but Florida weather will always be dynamic, so we'll just continue to track and hopefully get a good chance to hit that window on Saturday.
And just a reminder, everything else on the vehicle and for the mission was looking good today. It was just the weather, which, as John I said earlier, and Lauren even referred to him mentioning this, weather is the one thing that we actually cannot control on our missions. So unfortunately, it did cause us to scrub today, but the vehicles are healthy. Bob and Doug were ready and they should be ready to go again with the next launch attempt on Saturday.
Just looking at our data, it looks like that RP1 is just about all out. So we'll just kind of stand by for a few more moments. Hopefully we get that call soon, John I.
Yeah, I was going to, while we're waiting to hear the call that the last percentage of fuel is off, I was going to comment on Jesse's discussion about it was just the weather. I think during this countdown, there were more words said about the weather than everything else. I'm listening right now to a weather discussion in the background.
And again, for people wondering if we knew that we did have bad weather, even from this morning, again, we do monitor this all the way down to the final minutes of the countdown. And with Florida weather being pretty sporadic, sometimes we have even hurricanes coming through or bad weather coming through and passing 20 minutes later and having good weather for a launch. So this is why we continued to attempt to launch today, but unfortunately for T0 today, weather was not on our side.
Yeah, and Jesse, this is John again. I dropped off to listen to a weather discussion. They were just giving the times. The lightning rule went green, so we could have gone without a lightning concern. The attached anvil rule cleared, but the field mill rule is expected to clear at 58 minutes after the hour. So that's another 4.5 minutes from now. So we were close, but we needed about 25 minutes later launch time. It does remind me, at risk of offending some people, but the old saying that says it's better to be on the ground wishing you were flying than flying wishing you were on the ground.
Yes, definitely. Safety first, always, and making sure that when Bob and Doug do fly, they are flying safely and as planned. So again, this is standard procedure for us to make sure that they do have a safe flight to the International Space Station.
All right, well, for now, we're just continuing to stand by, expecting the call that all of that prop has now been offloaded from Falcon 9.
Venting vehicle tanks to nominal TPC set points for Coringas.
At this moment, the launch escape system is still armed. Once the prop offload is complete, that'll be the next step in our procedures to have Bob and Doug begin to make their way out of Dragon.
LD, countdown 1. LD. We have the prompt here for nominal crew egress.
Okay, so we're ready for launch escape system disarm.
As affirmed, ready for launch escape disarm.
MD copies. You guys are ready? Yeah, launch team's ready. Go ahead and advise the crew.
Hey, Dragon SpaceX, you copied that discussion. So with that, you are go for disarming launch escape system per section 2 of 5.100.
Well, for that work, section 2, disarming the launch escape system.
All right, that was the call we were waiting for, propelling off of Falcon 9. So Doug Hurley, Bob Ankin now going to disarm the launch escape system on Dragon. And once that's disarmed, those 8 Super Draco engines will be out of the mix.
SpaceX Dragon launch escape system has been disarmed into Alpha Decimal 3.
Copy that. We concur.
And showing then confirmed the launch escape system has been disarmed.
And Dragon SpaceX, with that confirmation, you are go to open your visors and proceed to section 3.
Okay, we'll open the visors and go to section 3.
As you heard and you can see, Bob and Doug can now open their visors and get ready for exiting the vehicle. Again, they kept their visors on while the launch escape system was armed, while prop offloading was continuing, and that is just to make sure that they are safe. Now that there is no more propellant on any of the vehicles, they are safe to have disarmed the launch escape system and now are getting ready for that crew arm to swing back the hatch to open and for them to egress.
SpaceX Dragon with an update. We're holding in 3.4 and we're ready for seat rotation when you are.
Copy that. We'll wait for the closeout team to open the hatch and verify clearance, and then we can execute seat rotation.
Dragon captain.
And there's that crew arm swinging back towards Dragon. Once that crew arm is in place, they will be able to open the hatch on Crew Dragon. Bob and Doug's seats will rotate back out of launch position so that they can safely get out of their seats and egress the vehicle.
And we heard they'll have what they call nominal egress, so just the normal procedures for getting them out of the capsule. That means the same closeout team that was there to get them in will be able to assist as they come out. They'll arrive and get that hatch open, and then they'll be able to rotate the seats. That'll rotate Bob and Doug pretty much forward, where they'll be in the original position that the seats were configured when they made their way into Dragon. It just gets them a little bit out and under the displays and makes getting in and out of the capsule a little bit easier. They've been in those seats for about 3 hours at this point, so definitely a long day for the crew. As they woke up about 6 hours prior to our T-0, had their breakfast, which we confirmed was steak and eggs, at least for Doug Hurley. And then they proceeded through all of the suit up and the trip to the pad, making their way inside Dragon, where they've been for about the last 3 hours at this point. We were on track for an on-time liftoff right at 4:33 p.m. Eastern Time, but did have to scrub a little under 17 minutes before launch due to weather. So for now, we've offloaded all of the propellant off of Falcon 9. The launch escape system has been disarmed. That crew access arm is back right up next to Dragon, as you can see in that view on the left. Pretty soon we'll see the teams arrive to get the hatch open, get Bob and Doug out, and they'll make their way back to crew quarters and their quarantine. It is important to note that throughout the entire process of them getting into Dragon, suiting up all of those different steps, they maintain that same quarantine that they've been in since for about 2 weeks now, and that is specifically for events like today, where we have to scrub and just go to another day. So we don't want to break that quarantine once we're putting them into that launch vehicle, and that's a standard quarantine that we have for any crew members flying to the International Space Station. The current COVID-19 pandemic obviously puts a little bit of extra pressure and a little bit of an extra spotlight on that, but they're following a lot of the same procedures that we have in place just to keep crew members healthy before they go and spend several months in space in an enclosed environment with just a couple of other people.
Right, and it's a little bit more difficult to get them help on the space station, right? So we want to make sure that when they do head up to the space station, that they are fully healthy. So this, again, is standard procedure, not just because of this pandemic that's going on. This is a standard procedure for astronauts to quarantine prior to heading to the station. And as Dan mentioned, this is a standard procedure to exit the vehicle as well. We did scrub today, but this is not an emergency state. This is standard procedure. This is something that is practiced and rehearsed and made sure that we do follow our standard procedures to make sure that everything is still safe. Bob and Doug exit safely and go back into quarantine and get ready for our next launch attempt.
Looks like they're getting a chance to stretch their legs, though.
Yeah.
Dan, Jesse, I'm monitoring along in the scrub procedure right now. They're getting the goes to get the folks back to the pad, the crew that'll open the hatch. So they have notified the team chief, launch engineering, to return to the pad As a reminder, around the pad, the Air Force and NASA set up roadblocks to make sure nobody gets into the hazard area. So they will head to the roadblocks, they'll pull them open so that they can drive to the pad. So launch director, I think, is estimating it's still about 15 minutes for the crew to drive all the way down out to 39A, get up the tower, and then begin operations on the hatch. They have confirmed that the purge of the Dragon service section, which is nitrogen during the countdown to avoid an oxygen leak, that is back on air now. The crew access arm is on air, so they're ready for the egress team to get up into the tower. But it's going to take them a little bit still, I think, to drive down the road in the vehicles and go up the elevator. But everything continuing to run per a normal scrub countdown, which we have had the opportunity to practice with the crew in, for example, the dry dress rehearsal last Saturday after we had done the static fire of the Falcon 9 the day before.
I've been seeing a few questions, people asking why aren't we just trying to launch tomorrow? As John and I was talking us through, there's some very specific times you have to identify when you're going to be able to link up with the International Space Station. You only have so much fuel, which can only generate so much energy to make sure you're going to intersect with the station, which is flying at over 17,000 miles an hour. So you're hitting one bullet with another bullet. Some of our other launch attempts are able to make it to the station, but have much longer times.
To prevent us from losing comms, we're going to be switching to umbilical at this time. I'm going to be unmerging Countdown 1, but we'll keep you updated here on Dragoncraft.
Okay, yeah, we see the Cedrus countdown with a little over 3 minutes. We'll stand by for your next call on umbilical.
Copy.
The crew getting a call, they're just going to reconfigure some communications. But as to why we're not launching, say, tomorrow...
And core and Countdown 1 loops are merged.
But when we pick our launch attempts, we also have to take in mind some of the human factors of these attempts. Some of these other launch attempts may exist, but it would require Dragon taking in excess of 30 or more hours potentially to reach the station, which could wreak some havoc with the sleep shift cycles, not only for Bob and Doug, but also for the crew on board station that has to line up their sleep schedule with Bob and Doug as they arrive. And the crews on station and Bob and Doug will be operating off of Greenwich Mean Time once they get there.
Dragon, SpaceX, comm check, umbilical.
SpaceX Dragon, loud and clear on umbilical.
Copy, heavy the same.
Still getting good comm between the crew and the core here in Hawthorne. But really, just to sum it up, we pick our launch attempts for a number of reasons, not just can we make it to the station, but just how long is it going to take to get there. And that's why Saturday is going to be our best option. We're going to be targeting that one at 3:22 p.m. Eastern Time for our next attempt. And it'll be a little over 19, maybe a little over 20 hours until we actually arrive at the space station if we're able to get off the ground on Saturday.
And this gives Bob and Doug, a few days to kind of shake off the nerves from today's launch attempt, give them some more time to rest, and again get ready for our launch attempt on Saturday. If you're just now joining us, we did scrub our Demonstration 2 mission today. And as John mentioned, we are waiting for the egress team to make it back to the launch pad, head up the tower, and help the crew, or help Bob and Doug egress the vehicle.
Dragon SpaceX for closeout team status.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the closeout team has arrived at the pad and they are proceeding to the white room.
Copy that.
And you heard that call out. The egress team is at the pad and are proceeding to meet Bob and Doug in the white room where they can open the hatch and help them exit the vehicle.
But we'll continue to stick with Bob and Doug until we see that hatch get open and them start to make their way out. And then they're going to, and there we can get some views once more back at the pad. You can see that egress team moving back in. They were wearing the black clean suits that we saw as they were helping Bob and Doug get into the Dragon just several hours ago. They're now going to get on the elevator, make their way back up, down the crew access arm, and then we'll get that Dragon side hatch opened.
And as we saw earlier, this is a very tall structure, but that elevator is pretty quick there. So we saw them enter the bottom of the tower. It should be a very short time before they make it to the top and are able to get to the white room and open the hatch for Bob and Doug.
If you want.
And should just be a few more moments. We'll see that closeout team make their way back into the crew access arm and down the hatchway. And again, if you are just now tuning in, we did have that scrub just about a little under 17 minutes before launch. Our next launch attempt is going to be this Saturday, May 30th. At launch time, it's going to be another instantaneous launch time. It's going to be 3:22 p.m. Eastern time over there in Florida. And assuming an on-time launch, it'll be a pretty similar flight that we were looking at today, where it'll be roughly about 19 hours before they make that initial contact to the International Space Station. They'll get on orbit and execute a series of 5 different burns to gradually raise their orbit until they're just a few hundred meters below the station and maybe a few kilometers behind. And then they'll do all of the final approach initiation maneuvers. And by that point, the team here in Hawthorne will be working very closely with the team down in Houston in the International Space Station Flight Control Room. Weather for Saturday still not ideal, but it's roughly what we started out with today, where we have about a 40% chance, possibility of violation, and it'll be tracking a lot of the same issues with cumulus clouds and potential precipitation. We'll also be keeping an eye on all of the downrange weather. It looks like we're seeing some people start to make their way into the crew access arm now, so we should see them get that Dragon side hatch open in just a few minutes. But as a reminder, we'll be looking at weather around the launch pad and weather downrange in their flight path on the way to orbit, and that's always checked just in case they have to do any kind of emergency maneuver and land down in the Atlantic Ocean. We will be making sure that the weather is at acceptable levels all the way until they're into space. So you can see the team coming down now. Should see the hatch open momentarily, and then we can begin to get Bob and Doug out of the Dragon spacecraft.
And again, we are staying live until Bob and Doug are safely out of Crew Dragon. You can see on your left-hand screen the team getting ready to open the hatch for them and help them out of their seats.
And at this point, the launch escape system has been disarmed. That was done after we successfully offloaded all of the propellants from the first and second stage of the Falcon 9 rocket. There are propellants loaded into Dragon, so the teams look like they were just doing what we call kind of a sniff test, so using a portable detector just to assess the atmosphere around the Dragon, the capsule itself, before they get the hatch open and bring Bob and Doug out.
All of this is standard safety procedures for egressing the vehicle. This is to ensure the safety of the crew as well as Bob and Doug.
Dragon SpaceX for status.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the closeout team is at the White Room. They are configuring the crew arm for egress, expected to take no earlier than 10 minutes.
Okay, 10 minutes. Thank you.
There should be just about 10 minutes. As a reminder, they're in the White Room. We walked through that a little bit earlier in our coverage this morning. The White Room name simply because of its color, and that's something that started all the way back during earlier Gemini missions, and that is literally the last place on planet Earth where astronauts are standing before they get loaded into this vehicle. It has an environmental control apparatus and a seal that it can put right up against the Dragon spacecraft just to keep all of that dust, dirt, and Florida humidity
And Dragon
out of the
SpaceX,
capsule.
we're right at 3 hours in seat rotation. I just wanted to check in with you on comfort levels.
I'd say no changes, Jay. It hasn't been too bad at all.
Copy all.
And obviously at this point, with the launch escape system disarmed, we have loosened up straps and gotten our feet out of the straps on the bottom of the seat, so it's a little more comfortable anyway.
Copy all. Looks comfortable.
Right now, the closeout team just going to take a couple of minutes to configure the White Room. They'll set up a seal between it and the Dragon spacecraft just to make sure we're not letting anything from the surrounding environment get into that spacecraft, which is kept very pristine, obviously, for the crew members once they're inside. They have a small bridge that just connects the crew arm to the capsule itself, just making sure they have a nice clear path for their entrance and exit from the spacecraft. So it should just be a few more minutes. We'll see that hatch get opened, and then our crew members can start to make their way out. And you heard seat rotation. They rotate the seats prior to their actual flight to where they're a little bit more parallel to the ground, and that just puts them directly in front of those displays. We'll see them rotate down, just giving them easy access to get out of the capsule.
And as Dan mentioned, we want to keep FOD out of the capsule. FOD is foreign object debris, so that's basically anything that does not belong inside of the vehicle. So not just like dirt and dust, but just anything that was not meant to be inside of there should not be there. So we are doing everything as a standard procedure to make sure that we do keep FOD out, especially since this is going to be another attempt and another opportunity for FOD to enter the vehicle. As they're exiting, we still make sure that we keep everything basically like a clean room.
Dragon SpaceX, you may hear some vehicle venting in about 20 seconds.
Copy.
John Innsbrucker here with the webcast desk in Hawthorne, California. We are continuing to wait for the crew to open the side hatch. We've got the camera showing astronauts Doug Hurley, Bob Behnken inside. Visors are up. They've gotten their feet out of the restraints. Gloves are off in case of Doug, it looks like. And the team is just outside the hatch. They're going through the sequence right now, make sure pressure checks are all good, make sure there are no concerns with gases, be it the propellants of the vehicle or just nitrogen gas that we use as a purge. Currently we are coming up on about 15 minutes after the plan T0. To just reiterate what Dan and Jesse have been talking about earlier, we had a good countdown. I had a lot of fun saying there were no issues on Falcon 9 or Dragon of a technical sort. The range was ready to support. The downrange weather looked good in case Dragon had to make a unplanned abort splashdown in an escape maneuver somewhere in the Atlantic. And we even had the, once we get on orbit, in case Dragon had to re-enter and come back early, the weather was good in the Pacific in case it had to come down. So everything was looking our way except Mother Nature, the weather. It's Florida, and we got into the back end of the tropical storm that has now gone ashore in the Carolinas. But unfortunately, that left everything disrupted just enough to where we violated several of the weather rules, and we did not have enough time for them to go green. Green meaning where the range says conditions are clear and you are all right to launch. we were still red on those rules, and that was the end of the countdown for the day. Again, we scrubbed at T-minus 16 minutes, 54 seconds. That was shortly before we were due to begin loading the liquid oxygen onto the second stage. That was both the logical breakpoint in the countdown procedure, where we could take a scrub without loading one more propellant on the vehicle, and at the same time that was when the range gave us the final bad news that we weren't going to get green conditions before the clock ran out of T0. So continuing to watch right now as the crew works to get the hatch open. They send final commands, making sure that everything's go. Once the hatch is open, the ground crew can verify that there's nothing in the way under the seats that Doug and Bob are sitting in, and we will get the seat rotation again, get them back a little bit more vertical. They're more on their backs right now in the launch position, so they'll rotate, then they'll help them out of the seats, and they'll come back out and down the arm and off of the tower.
Dragon SpaceX, for status, it looks like the closeout team is inflating the hatch seal, the arm seal right now.
Okay, yeah, we can see the folks outside the window.
All right, we've been quiet for a few minutes, but if you're just now tuning in, we did not launch today. We did have to scrub today's mission due to weather. We were just under 17 minutes away from our T0 time at 4:33 Eastern when the call was made. We were still in violation of a few of the weather constraints that just are really there to inform teams when it's safe to launch. So we're looking at weather both around the pad and weather all the way on the way to orbit for them. So we did have to scrub. Since then, we've been able to get all of the propellant off of Falcon 9. The launch escape system has been disarmed, and right now the closeout teams are there in the white room, so right at the end of that crew access arm. They're configuring the big seal that goes around the Dragon capsule just to make sure its environment is isolated from all that nasty Florida weather, and then they'll be able to get the hatch open and we'll get Bob and Doug back out.
We're coming up on just under an hour since the planned T0. Again, if you're just joining us, well, we've been here summing up for a while.
Dragon, SpaceX for status.
Yep, stand by for status check.
Go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, closeout team's still working to do the hatch seal inflation. Expect another 5 to 10 minutes.
Okay.
Okay. We scrubbed at T-minus 16 minutes, 54 seconds. We violated 3 weather rules. The weather rules finally cleared up, but it was long after the planned T0. The SpaceX egress team did return to the pad. They were sent through the roadblocks that surround the pad, demarcating where the hazard area is. Team's up on the crew arm, and as you just heard, SpaceX talking to astronauts Bob and Doug. They're working the seal around Dragon. Then we make sure that Dragon capsule pressure is equalized with the crew arm, and then we'll go into the hatch opening sequence. So we've still got several more minutes. We'll carry that as we go. A couple of points to bring up. Once the crew comes off of the Dragon and comes back down, goes back to the crew quarters to de-suit, we will be
Dragon
leaving.
SpaceX for awareness. We're going to command the vehicle into pad hatch open in preparation for hatch opening.
Copy that.
Okay, that's good. That'll get them into the sequence to make sure that the pressure is inside and outside.
And
are equal.
note this will equalize cabin pressure, so you may notice something there.
Okay, thanks.
So as I started to mention, once everybody's off, we'll leave the Falcon 9 Dragon, the crew arm, where they are. That is in the launch support position. There's no plan to come back down to horizontal. The vehicle is designed to stay vertical. Now, if we were to find something wrong during the countdown as we go through data review, that could mean that we have to come horizontal, as we did late last night, early this morning, as we were working a ground issue on the transporter erector, and then we went right back up. But currently, no plans to come horizontal. We'll stay vertical up to the next launch attempt on Saturday. There will also be, as is typical, engineers will go through all of the data they collected today, and then there will be a report out in what's called a Delta Launch Readiness Review, probably this Friday before we get into the next launch attempt on Saturday. That's where the engineering disciplines will brief management, chief engineer, launch director, mission director, the NASA customer, where we stand on today's countdown, what we learned as well as our readiness to proceed into another countdown attempt. But currently at Kennedy Space Center at historic Pad 39A, we're getting ready for the hatch opening and the crew to be able to leave Dragon, come back down, get out of their suits, and wait to go another day, hopefully this coming Saturday, the 30th.
And Dragon SpaceX, sure you see vehicles in pad hatch open. The AVVs are now open, and that nitrox injection is complete.
Yep, we felt it and heard it, and copy all.
And Dragon SpaceX for status, the closeout team is stepping into hatch opening now.
Copy.
John Innsbrucker back here at the webcast desk in Hawthorne, California. We've got another camera up, and you can see the side-by-side view on the monitor. Astronauts Bob and Doug inside, waiting for the hatch to come open. We're still in the middle of a equalization step. Make sure that pressure inside the Dragon is equal to the ambient pressure, so that when we open the hatch, it just comes open without any extra force. You can also see the SpaceX team is up alongside the capsule. They are removing essentially the thermal protection devices. For example, if you have a door handle on your automobile, if you're going to have to re-enter from outer space, you're going to have to put a small heat shield over that door handle. Otherwise, any kind of protuberances, cavities could be subject to burnup. So they have to take their time, make sure that we get all of the thermal protection safety devices off, so that they can then get access to the mechanism to go ahead and bring the hatch open. So what you are watching right now on the left monitor is the egress team going through the steps. This is typical. We're not hearing any chatter over the pad net that they're having any problems. They just take their time and make sure that everybody's ready to bring the hatch open when they finally get there. So currently we are T plus 1 hour and 11 minutes or so since the planned launch. Obviously, we're still on the ground as we're going through the post-scrub operations to bring astronauts Doug Hurley and Bob Bacon out of the capsule. And you can see now hatch is coming open. There's a view from the camera inside the capsule. You can see the hatch area. Crew gave a quick wave to the ground crew when it came open. And right now they should be inspecting the area underneath the seats so that we can command the seats to rotate back into the ingress-egress position, make it a little easier on Bob and Doug to get in and out of the seats.
Dragon SpaceX, just for awareness, they have a few more steps in their procedure, and they should be calling to us for seat rotation shortly.
Okay, copy that. Yep, we see them working on that, and just as a lead into that, we are ready for the seat rotation. So just let us know when you're ready to start.
We'll go.
Here's a confirmation from the Dragon team talking to the astronauts that they're just about ready to send the seat rotation command. Again, the ground crew is verifying, making sure that none of the cargo that's packed in Dragon underneath the crew, nothing is in the way, nothing came loose. You're looking at one row of crew seating, but there is, as we've mentioned before, Dragon's designed to carry up to 7. But on this flight, for example, much of the cargo that we're carrying is loaded in various areas down below where the astronauts are seated. So they're just verifying nothing's in the way so that when they send the rotation command, the seats will pivot without encumbrance.
Dragon SpaceX, we are initiating seat rotation.
Dragon copies, we're ready.
That call out from the Dragon core up to the crew, letting them know that we are sending commands from the ground to rotate the seats, and you can see astronauts Doug Hurley, Bob Behnken rotating in their seat back to a more comfortable position to get in and out of the capsule.
Dragon SpaceX, seats are upright. Thanks for the valiant effort today, helping us test our scrub timeline, and we'll see you Saturday.
Yeah, we appreciate those words. Everybody did great today. It was a great practice, and we'll do it again on Saturday. Everybody stay safe, and we'll talk to you on the loops.
Likewise.
Well, Dan, we've heard it. They've got rotated. The hatch is open. The ground crew is going to work to get the astronauts out. The SpaceX Dragon team, like the SpaceX Falcon 9 team, is going to be coming off the console now as we turn it over to the folks on the pad. So while we didn't launch, it was a pretty good countdown and scrub sequence. So we've got that good lesson learned under our belt. We look forward to Saturday having even better results when we get close to T0.
That's right. Always great when we don't have any issues with the capsule or the rocket, which we didn't today. Just had to fight that weather. And we'll be doing the same on Saturday. We are looking at about a 50% probability of violation. That's about where we were today. We did see it was all just a matter of trying to line up correctly, and didn't make it today, but we're going to try again on Saturday.
Right, and it sounds like we were just about half an hour away from making the launch attempt today with weather, with 50% weather chance on Saturday. Hopefully we have a better day at T0 for liftoff.
But we're definitely going to all be back. Jesse, myself, and John I will be here in Hawthorne to take you along every step of the way. We hope everyone else tunes in also, because this is really going to be a monumental moment. We're now going to look towards Saturday for America once again launching U.S. astronauts on American rockets from American soil. With them getting out of the capsule, though, that's going to do it for us here at Hawthorne. We're going to send you back down to Florida for one last check-in with our teams there. So over to you, Marie, Lauren, Leland, if you're still sticking around, and we're going to be looking forward to Saturday.
All right, thanks a lot, Dan. Yeah, we're just all sitting here. We watched Bob Behnken just climb out of his seat. Looks like he is out of Crew Dragon now, and Doug Hurley following suit. No pun intended. There we see Bob in the foreground and Doug climbing out of Crew Dragon in the background. Pad closeout team looks like helping them out, so any minute they're going to be basically just reversing course, coming back the way from whence they came. Leland, I know you had a scrub years back.
Yeah, Marie, in 2008, we were having breakfast. I never scrubbed while I was in the vehicle, but we were having breakfast, and we got a call from the flight director saying that we had these engine cutoff sensors that were bad. 2 were bad, and the flight rules say that you should have to have 3 of 4 to fly. And so we all said we're not going to fly unless we have them. And I think we all need to know that the flight rules are there to protect, our astronauts and their families. And we got very close today. We sometimes get that launch fever that we want to go ahead and just try it anyway. But we have these rules for a reason, and it's really important to stick to the rules, even in the heat of battle, even with dignitaries here. It's just the way that we have to do it as operators.
It's also a good wet dress exercise. Went through, exercised all the systems nearly to T0, which is incredible. I believe this may have been the first time Bob and Doug are sitting on top of in our vehicle with a fueled rocket. So that's pretty cool.
For sure.
Closing the hatch, exercising the environmental life support systems, doing that flight leak check. I mean, all of this is a ton of learning that came out of here, even if we didn't ultimately go to space today.
Absolutely. So we're getting a cool view that we wouldn't have seen if they'd launched. They're making their way back down the crew access arm. And they are going to be turning the corner there, heading to the stairs that are going to take them down to the elevator.
Passing the worm.
Passing the worm. So, yep, they're heading down the stairs now. It's going to take them down to the 255-foot level, and then they're going to be getting in the elevator, take them down to the ground level. And we'll do it again on Saturday.
It's actually very reassuring that all systems were go. You know, there was no problems with the vehicle at all, as Lauren, as you said, and it was just some weather. And I think if we have that same performance on Saturday, and the weather gods give us some good juju there, we'll be good to go.
Yes, please. I mean, we were so close today. It hurt my heart. If we had 10 more minutes, it sounded like we probably would have made it, but just was not to be today. And of course, we're going to always do what is the safest thing for the crew. And as they head into the elevator there, we do want to go over to Operations and Support Building 2 now, where the NASA Administrator, Jim Bridenstine, is standing by. He would like to provide his own thoughts now. We'll go to him.
Well, thank you, Marie. I know there's a lot of disappointment today. The weather got us. But I also want to say it was a great day for NASA. It was a great day for SpaceX. I think our teams worked together in a really impressive way, making good decisions all along. So here in this particular case, we had just simply too much electricity in the atmosphere. There wasn't really a lightning storm or anything like that, but there was a concern that if we did launch, it could actually trigger lightning. And so we made the right decision. We had the parameters set ahead of time, the teams worked together, and in the end, the right decision was made. I will tell you, I've done a lot of interviews over the last 2 days, and in those interviews, I get asked over and over again, is there undue pressure here? People say to me, with all of the attention of the world on this launch, with all of the VIPs coming, are you going to feel pressure on this launch? And I will tell you, as I've told our teams, under no circumstances should anybody feel pressure. If we are not ready to go, we simply do not go. And I will tell you, I am proud, so proud of our teams working together to make the right decision in this particular case. We have a lot to look forward to. In just a few short days, on Saturday afternoon, we're going to do it again. Here's what we know. We are going to launch American astronauts on American rockets from American soil. We're going to do that. We're very close. I also want to say that this was an important milestone just today. We did a wet dress rehearsal. We haven't done a wet dress rehearsal with our astronauts full gear before. We've done a dry dress rehearsal. Now we've done a wet dress. So we learn a lot every time we do these things. This is no different, and we get a lot of great data from doing what we just did. So today was a good day for NASA. It was a good day for SpaceX, and we've got a lot to look forward to. So I want to say congratulations to both of the teams, and let's go get this done. I know we're up for it. Saturday is going to be a great day, and here we go again. So thank you to everybody for all the great work. Marie, back to you.
All right, thank you so much. Those were some great insights from Jim Bridenstine, the NASA administrator. The crew's making their way back to astronaut crew quarters, where they're going to remain in quarantine until Saturday. They've been in quarantine for 2 weeks, and there they will stay to keep them safe and healthy for our next launch attempt. Again, we had to stand down from launch today because of unfavorable weather conditions around Launch Complex 39A, but we're going to be ready to do this again Saturday, May 30th. The new launch time will be 3:22 p.m., and our coverage will begin live here on NASA TV at 11 o'clock in the morning Eastern Time, Saturday. So be sure to tune back in on NASA television and nasa.gov/live if you're watching along online, and we will be back here to take you through it every step of the way. Thanks for sticking with us, and we will see you back here Saturday.
I've always thought, like, oh my gosh, when you go to space, like, you don't have to grocery shop for like 6 months.
I think it's going to actually put me on a schedule for eating. I am horrible at eating at all hours of the night. I miss lunch.
We're also talking about like beverages. Like, we can probably only drink powdered beverages or water, so nothing, no sodas.
No sodas.
Nothing carbonated.
Nothing.
Yeah. It's just,
I think it'll be a little bit more healthy than what I normally eat. Plus, I get to eat everything with tortillas, and I'm from San Antonio, so. I will say we are doing this over a holiday weekend. You have huge barbecues and lots of great food, so I think I'm going to want to eat some really good ribs and, you know, fajitas. Solemnly swear to eat all of the astronaut food and not cheat.
never. We're in this together, so if we feel weak, we'll text each other. Maybe
We chose 7 days out of the standard menu. You're going to have a protein, some carb, some fruit. The other large category of products that we have are thermostabilized products.
Which is sort of like a military ration that we don't have to refrigerate to keep fresh.
Can't do them in a microwave.
I was going to say, it's like something that can't go in a microwave. I was going to ask because I didn't want to find that out the hard way.
We also have rehydratable food, which is this type in a vacuum pack where we have to add water, either hot or cold.
We're going to give you a syringe.
Oh, I don't like needles.
And it comes with a needle. So this is how you rehydrate. Okay?
I don't think we will want to have that laying around our office.
Can I take that to airport security?
It is the day before we start the food challenge, and I just went to go pick up all the materials from our wonderful food lab. So they're all packaged and in my trunk. I asked them what I should eat as my last real meal, and they said something fresh, maybe a salad. The problem is I was thinking nachos, so...
As I suspected, I wouldn't have time to eat in the airport. I'm probably going to grab something to eat on the fly. Hopefully there's some tacos.
So like I said, I was debating healthy or, not healthy. Of course, I chose nachos.
I did end up picking up some tacos, some shrimp tacos actually, with some rice and some beans. I told you I love tacos.
It's important to always choose nachos, so I'm going to call this hashtag she chose nachos.
She chose nachos. He chose tacos.
So I have beef and mushrooms, rice pilaf, tomato and artichokes, and a wheat flatbread.
Well, I don't know about that. I have grilled chicken, mac and cheese, vegetarian chili. We're in Texas, come on. Cran apple dessert.
Oh man, I already remember she told us to tear it so there's no extra pieces of trash.
Oh, so like if we were in space,
So
this
like
would all be floating around.
Yeah.
Once we open those packages, the food is what we consider to be liberated, and it can just float anywhere. And sometimes you find yourself using your spoon or your mouth to chase around the food and make sure you get it all in your mouth instead of stuck against the wall or somebody's face.
Let's heat up a bowl of water and set these green ones in there. Yeah. And it looks like it's getting to be the right consistency. Yeah. We might have not done hot enough water too. That might be why it's not absorbing like all the way. Okay,
well,
this is good.
This is interesting. It's not bad. Wait a minute, what's this?
This is good. Yeah, the artichokes and tomatoes are good too.
Should I try and eat it like this?
Yeah.
Ooh. You should have just got straws. I could have been like,
Right? This is making my day. Like, this is a treat.
I have cran apple dessert.
This would remind me of home.
Yum.
So it's been a long day, but I did not get hungry at all. I had my butterscotch pudding as part one of my snacks. Wondering if the workouts would be hard. They're pretty much the same. I feel really high energy, and I didn't even have coffee this morning. I'm actually really excited about this chicken, corn, and beef. This potato medley actually looks like some potatoes with spices and melted cheese on it. I'm very excited to get some melted cheese texture up in here. Little butter cookies look really delicious and super bougie.
So you'll see I have some Caribbean chicken, pesto pasta with some corn, tortillas, vanilla pudding, and some pears. I got a little bit better at actually making the space food today, but I punctured the actual corn. I cut through it, so I had to rehydrate it through the side. So lesson learned, this smells absolutely delicious.
It's my boyfriend's last day at his old job, so one of his favorite clients brought him these delicious, huge-looking cupcakes, so none for me.
Ooh. Do you see that? This is science, y'all. So,
I'm a nurse now.
My mom would be proud. Like, Mom, I'm doing nurse things today. Look at this. Oh, okay. This looks like oatmeal. Do PR for NASA, they said it'd be fun. What are you having for lunch? What's your main?
I have citrus salad, and then my main thing is Fiesta chicken.
Ooh, I love Fiesta.
Yeah, and rice. yeah, rice with butter. So I'm really excited because I think our food's gonna be warmer today.
I agree.
I think we did this right with some practice yesterday.
This is some smoked turkey.
Oh God!
Leaking. I wasn't expecting. It smells funky. Cornbread dressing, and then some cauliflower. I'm not a fan of this.
Today we're eating in the LBJ room. So President LBJ is who Johnson Space Center is named after.
We should do a toast.
We should. Go LBJ. Oh, mine's closed.
And so here we go. Ooh, good. This is the chicken noodles. Let's try some of this green bean. Oh, that could use some hot sauce. The lentil soup. Ooh, it's hot. Ooh, hot. See, these are actually my tortillas. Astronauts on board the International Space Station can actually eat tortillas, and it's one of the things that they like to do because you can pretty much grab anything that's floating in space with them.
2 quick miscellaneous notes. I've been living a really scheduled life and waking up early and going to bed early because I've been having to wake up with enough time to make breakfast, and then I go to bed shortly after dinner just so I don't get hungry again.
I think Dan has a burrito.
Oh yeah.
I'm jealous right now. I went for some queso.
Apples, fresh fruit.
Which may or may not be organic.
My snack was chicken in a pouch, so.
Mine was tuna in a pouch.
There you go.
Lemon curd cake. It's kind of like you're right.
Not your grandma's I was just at the mall, and that was a weak time because all of my friends got some really good appetizers, and when you're just all sitting around the table together, I had to really stop myself a couple times to not mindlessly reach for some of their chips or pretzels.
What are you eating?
A pancake.
And what is Isidro eating? Space chocolate.
Space chocolate.
Yeah.
How do you feel about the astronaut candy? Is it yummy?
Can you tell which one's the space food and which one is our regular Easter meal here?
Hey guys, what are y'all making?
Astronaut burgers.
My family gets to eat this delicious grilled food, and I get to eat a kind of brisket, a space brisket, and baked barbecue beans, so we'll see how that ends up being.
See this? Oh, it's coming apart.
Oh no!
Save the meat!
It's Monday, so we're done at Wednesday morning. We're really ready to be done. The weekend was hard.
I was not able to eat any of the food that was at the festival. There were some jalapeno corn dogs, and I'm like,
That sounds so good.
what is life right now? I can't even.
And we have curry chicken, green beans, and potatoes. The potatoes have been iffy, but these look better than some of the ones. Cream of mushroom soup.
Oh, a little bit of India, a little bit of Texas with this countryness. I'm so ready for this to be over.
Yeah, we're ready.
I need my social life back.
Yeah, no, I'm just...
Having milk today. Powdered milk. Ah!
We're nervous about the guests.
I'm more nervous about the milk, I'm not gonna lie. But something that I noticed while we've been eating this food is you have to have it really hot.
On the space station, we put it in a kind of it's almost like an easy bake oven.
Okay.
Where you and that does make a really big difference.
So,
I gotta admit, when I was making lunch this morning, I wasn't thinking this was gonna be on camera. Leftover rice, some turkey.
But it's home cooked.
It's definitely home cooked. Yeah, I was a big fan of the garlic paste.
Garlic paste.
That can fix anything.
Okay, question. Can you chew gum in space?
Yes.
Okay, because garlic, bad breath.
I wasn't trying to impress any of my crew members. We would use what we call food glue. Something, just make up something, spray some olive oil in there, try to get everything to stick together a little bit, or like I said, the garlic paste worked well for me. When you got a few people with rice in their eye, and then after that, you figure something out. It's a lot easier in space because we don't have to load the syringe. Like if you were trying to measure out 250 milliliters of water or 100 milliliters of water, we literally just dial that number and then press the button for hot or cold water.
Talk to me about tacos in space. Tortillas, are they great to have up there? Yeah. Oh, sorry. It just floated on this plate.
Gosh, if we had salsa, we did have salsa sometimes. You can put that on there. The salsa will stick to the bread. You can use the salsa for other things to stick to the salsa.
I'm from San Antonio, and I love tacos. So I told everyone I would make a space taco. Yeah. So it's a little bit leaky, extra moist.
In space. It doesn't rip off the edges, it just makes it level.
Gotta do the taco tilt because everybody knows. Good stuff.
That's awesome.
This was the Mexican scrambled eggs food lab. They know what they're doing. We have some scientists back there. So is there anything that you...
Way better than the LBJ toast. Favorite meal? I actually really liked a lot of the breakfast food, and the shrimp cocktail was in fact very good.
Ooh, shrimp cocktail, but the scrambled eggs in a taco? Ugh, man, sorry. Done. And maybe if I had a machine to kind of heat everything up.
If I was sealed away from the outside world and I didn't have all those temptations, maybe.
Maybe if the food was floating around me, but I don't think I would otherwise.
We could do that.
If I were an astronaut.
So I was debating, this is the same debate I started with, nachos or a salad.
Get them both.
I'll get both. I should get both.
At this point, I think we need to treat ourselves.
Oh, for sure.
But I can tell you, I really want some coffee.
Yeah.
Some nice
regular coffee.
Coffee.
Like a latte.
Powdered. I gotta get some coffee.
And a soda.
Yeah. This is not easy, y'all. I'm telling you.
My name is Dr. Emily Schaller, and I'm here at NASA's Wallops Flight Facility on the eastern shore of Virginia. We're here because NASA is using airplanes to study hurricanes. The mission is called HS-3, which stands for the Hurricane and Severe Storm Sentinel. What's a Severe Storm Sentinel? It's actually a remotely controlled airplane called the Global Hawk Unmanned Aerial Vehicle, or UAV. Pilots fly the plane from the cockpit on the ground. NASA is using these Global Hawks to study hurricanes in the Atlantic Ocean by flying over and around them. The Global Hawk can fly for very long periods of time at very high altitudes. It can fly almost twice as high as a commercial jet, and it can fly for over 24 hours without stopping. That's why scientists are using the Global Hawk for the HS-3 mission, so they can continuously study storms as they develop. Forecasters have a pretty good idea of where these storms go, but what they want to know is, will they grow? We spoke with NASA mission scientists about how the Global Hawk will help improve their understanding of hurricane formation and growth, and why it's so important for us to learn more about hurricanes.
The Hurricane and Severe Storm Sentinel has a goal to try to better understand the processes that control the intensity of storms. The ability to predict the intensity is very important because it impacts people in the coastal zones who, if they're anticipating a tropical storm, a Category 1 storm, and they end up getting a Category 3 storm, it makes a big difference in terms of their ability to prepare and deal with the storm consequences.
And this is really important because a category of a hurricane is the intensity of the winds associated with a hurricane. So a Category 5 hurricane is much more destructive than a Category 1. So being able to predict the difference between just a tropical storm, a Category 1, up to a Category 5 is really, really crucial to saving lives and lessening damage and so forth, particularly saving lives.
The benefit of HS-3 compared to any other hurricane mission is the fact that we have these planes able to fly upwards of 24 hours, and being able to monitor a storm for that long period of time and getting constant data, we can actually catch changes in the storm.
We will use 2 Global Hawks. One Global Hawk flies over vast areas around a hurricane. It measures the environment that a hurricane is embedded in. And then the second Global Hawk, instead of sampling the vast area, it goes right in to look at the eye and the eye wall and the inner core processes of a hurricane.
The Global Hawk unmanned aerial vehicles flown by NASA were originally built for the military and used for flight testing at Edwards Air Force Base in California. When the Air Force was done testing these models, they were transferred to NASA, which turned the planes into airborne laboratories to study the Earth. NASA flew its first science mission with a Global Hawk in 2010.
The Global Hawks are really a new aircraft for doing hurricane studies. Manned aircraft typically fly for, say, 8 to 10 hours when they do a research flight. Of that 8 to 10 hours, you may have 4 hours or more just getting to and from the storm, so that in a typical flight, you only get 4 to 6 hours actually sampling within the storm. With the Global Hawk, we can get 3 times, sometimes even 4 times as much as you can get with manned aircraft.
Now this plane can fly to 65,000 feet. It can fly 13 miles up. It can also fly for nearly 30 hours. So this plane can take off here from Virginia, on the coastline of Virginia, close to where hurricanes form. It can fly all the way to Africa. It can spend about 10 hours on the coastline of Africa and then fly all the way back. There's no plane that can do that in the NASA vehicles that we have.
Because the Global Hawk can fly so high for so long, scientists can study larger areas of the Earth for longer periods of time, in places where planes with pilots on board may not be able to reach. We spoke with pilot Phil Hall about the Global Hawk and what it's like to fly the plane without actually being inside it.
So the two Global Hawks that we're flying for HS3, Air Vehicle 6 and Air Vehicle 1, from a pilot perspective, it's a very different aircraft. We don't have any rudder pedals or a control yoke. We actually use a mouse and keyboard. We actually have a control room on the ground. We have two of them now. We have one at Edwards Air Force Base in California, and we have one here at Wallops Flight Facility in Virginia. So it's basically like a trailer. It's been specially designed for Global Hawk. It's full of computer systems that can talk to the aircraft. So we can connect to the internet, and all these satellite products of Lightning, the storm from satellite images, we're able to download that almost real time and use that to actually navigate the storm. For the first part of the mission, we actually fly the aircraft from Wallops. And once we get about 2 or 3 hours into our flight, we actually transfer control of the airplane back to Edwards Air Force Base, NASA Dryden Flight Research Center. It's very different from any other kind of aviation operation in that we have pilots on both coasts, and we can actually transfer control of the aircraft during the flight to the other pilots. And when you have these long missions, like 26 or 27 hours, one person can't sit there for the entire flight. So we actually have 3 or 4 shifts of people that come and go to man this aircraft. Now, pilots know how to fly planes and they can tell the plane where to go, but how does a pilot actually know where to go? You have to have scientific information. Now, scientists sit in a separate trailer. We have computers sitting in front of us. We bring in satellite information. We bring in forecast information. And because weather can change so fast, they can collect that information, interpret it, and then relay it to the pilots and say, well, instead of going over to this point, why don't you go over to this point over here, which is where we think the eye has relocated. So it's a great team between the scientists and the pilots to actually get the most information you can out of a flight.
How can you become involved in our mission? You can follow the plane too, just like the pilots and scientists do, by participating in live chats where you can get live updates on where the plane is flying right from your own classroom.
You can definitely be a part of our mission by actually being able to look at the same screen we're looking at. I'm looking at where the plane is flying with respect to the storm, and you have access to the same data I get to look at. You have access to see the plane's altitude, you can see the wind speeds, you can see the wind direction, and you can chat live with pilots, with forecasters, mission scientists, and we're looking at the same thing you are, and that's just really exciting to know that you can ask us any question at any time, and we are right there looking at the same thing.
To learn more about our mission, visit nasa.gov/HS3. See you next time on NASA Airborne.
Astronauts Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and then finally Mike Collins, now boarding the transfer van for the trip to the launch pad.
Flashing their cameras as the crew comes out.
This is a very historical walkway. It's the same path that the Apollo astronauts took to go to the moon.
The flying crew now departing from their crew quarters here at the Kennedy Space Center.
I'm here with Jim. He's going to teach us how to get oxygen on the surface of Mars. Jim, can you tell us where we are right now?
Absolutely. This is the JPL Mars Oxygen In Situ Resource Utilization Laboratory. We call this the MOXIE Lab for short.
The MOXIE instrument is a demonstration mission designed to prove that we can produce pure oxygen on the surface of Mars. If it's successful, NASA may opt to send a dedicated mission to produce oxygen for humans to use in the future.
So how do we make oxygen on the surface of Mars?
It's actually a fairly easy process. Basically what we do is we take Mars atmosphere, we run it into a unit called a solid oxide electrolysis unit, which is basically a fuel cell in reverse.
Wait a second. Reverse fuel cell? How does that work?
So this is the solid oxide electrolysis unit. What happens is we have Mars atmosphere enter in this line, goes into the SOXY unit. It's then heated up to 800 degrees Celsius. We inject energy into the cathode and anode. And then what happens is oxygen is separated from the CO2 and comes out this line over here. This line here is the waste gases that's left over from the catalyst process.
To test this technology, you're going to need some Martian atmosphere. Where on Earth are you going to find that?
We know the composition of Martian atmosphere. It's 95% CO2 with some trace gases. And there are companies here on Earth that will mix that gas for us. We call it Mars mixed gas, and we use it for most of our testing.
Well, what if we land on top of a mountain or down in a valley? The conditions for extracting oxygen are totally different. We've got to test for all of that.
So the way we test for it is we design an instrumentation system that covers all of the conditions of the instrument. Lower pressures, higher pressures, clogging filters, oxygen purity, all of that stuff.
Why don't we just bring the oxygen with us when we go to Mars?
It's very difficult to bring something from the surface of the Earth to the surface of Mars, and it costs millions and millions of dollars. So it's much easier and better for us if we try to get that resource from the planet.
Well, it's obviously a huge challenge, but we're both really optimistic up here. We're excited to see it on the Mars 2020 mission. Heads up, Watney. We've all played these claw games before where it can be really frustrating using a grapple to pull a toy out of a machine. Well, the success of NASA's InSight mission depends on a grapple. Let's learn about it on this episode of Crazy Engineering. All right, we are here at the InSight Lander Surface Test Bed. This is Nick. He was one of the key engineers on the grapple mechanism. Nick, thanks for joining us. Sure. You got this grapple. What does it do? What's its purpose?
So its purpose is to grab the instruments so the robotic arm can then lift them and place them down onto the surface.
When I play these arcade games, right, they're really hard to get that toy out of the game, and you're using a mechanism that kind of reminds me of that. Is that a good idea?
So the mechanisms themselves, although they look similar, are very different. With the arcade game, when you grab that stuffed animal and you pull on that stuffed animal, you actually open the claw fingers and that stuffed animal falls out. With the InSight grapple, that mechanism is designed to latch. So once those fingers are closed, it's impossible to pull on those fingers to open it.
So how does it work?
So the grapple has 5 fingers, and we designed this grapple to maximize our success. It uses a wax actuator to open the fingers. We grab onto little hooks at the top of each instrument, and then the robotic arm picks those instruments up and places them down on the surface.
You said wax, that we're using wax to open and close the grapple?
Yeah.
Why do we use wax? Why don't we use a more typical solenoid or an electric motor?
It's actually a thoroughly proven technology. It's used in space applications like the InSight grapple, but it's also used for decades in things like our car thermostats and our appliances at home. It uses a heater to melt some wax inside of a little housing, and when this wax melts, it expands and it develops this hydraulic pressure, and that pressure pushes out a rod which we use to actuate our mechanism.
Once it's completed its primary function of putting the instruments down, what does it do after that? How does it get out of the way for other things you want to do?
So there's actually another hook on the side of the robotic arm, and the robotic arm can maneuver itself so the grapple can re-stow itself on the side of the arm. Then the arm is free to essentially do whatever it needs to do.
Nick, this grapple mechanism is truly unique. It's really fun to learn about. Thank you so much for bringing us into the test bed and answering all these questions. And as always, thank you out there for paying attention, and check back here for some more crazy engineering.
How do you nurture an idea? Or shape it to solve problems, create opportunity, and open doors to a better life for all? First, find its strengths. Discover its limits. Refine it, test it, and repeat. At NASA's Langley Research Center, we strive to discover, distill, and connect great ideas, then channel them into solutions leading to a brighter future. With vision and determination, we look beyond what's possible today and strive to make tomorrow a better place. An idea could be as small as a few lines of code, or as big as a revolutionary way to travel. It could be a system for building in the vacuum of space, or a laser that helps explorers land safely on the moon. We're on a quest to discover trailblazing ideas and transformative tools. We build, measure, and explore. We accelerate technologies and connect concepts, along with the people who envision them. Together with our partners, we push for deeper understanding and search for innovations that will benefit everyone. Breakthroughs that improve how we fly, how we see the Earth, and how we explore the universe. Our work will spread global goodwill, improve lives, and protect our planet. A great leap starts with just one idea. NASA Langley, where great ideas take flight.
Okay, everybody, we're here with Neil. He's one of the key engineers on the GRACE follow-on mission. Neil, thank you so much for joining us and answering our questions. Why do we call it GRACE follow-on?
So GRACE stands for Gravity Recovery and Climate Experiment. We're using gravity to track water motion around the planet. And the follow-on is because we've done this before and we're doing it again with 2 new satellites. The original GRACE mission was launched in 2002. They lasted for 15 years and provided amazing science for the scientists.
Both of these missions have 2 satellites. Can you explain to us why we need 2 satellites instead of just 1?
So we need 2 satellites because we're trying to measure very precise small amounts of gravity changes in the Earth. The Earth is actually lumpy when it comes to gravity. Far away from Earth, gravity is just a single number, but as you get closer to the Earth, the gravity changes because the Himalayas have a little bit more mass, certain areas have less mass. And so as a satellite is orbiting the planet, as it comes towards a large mass, like the mountains, it actually will speed up. And then as it leaves, it will slow down. And so with 2 satellites, we're able to measure the distance between the 2.
How far apart are these satellites, and just how precise do they have to have the knowledge of each other's position?
We have the satellites at 200 kilometers apart, but we're measuring down to an accuracy of a micron level, which is about a tenth of a human hair.
That is extremely precise. It sounds like a very hard engineering problem. What's the technology that lets us do this?
We're using microwave technologies at about 30 gigahertz. Here you see one of the satellites, and 200 kilometers away is the other satellite. And what we're doing is we're firing an RF signal to the other satellite, and the other satellite's measuring that. And as you move backwards and forwards relative to the sine wave, you can measure the distance changes to the levels we need.
Neil, it's been well more than a decade since the original GRACE mission. I assume we're upgrading some of these technologies. Can you describe some of those?
Sure. Like technology advances in general, we've upgraded computer systems, we have more efficient solar cells, we have better star cameras, and like everything else in the future, we now have lasers.
Lasers, yes. What do lasers actually get for us?
So we're actually using the lasers to do the measurement between the 2 satellites. We're using RF systems from the previous missions. On top of that, we have this new technology demonstrator where we're going to fire laser beams between each other to make a more accurate measurement between the 2 satellites.
I am here with Morgan. She's a scientist on the Cassini project. The grand finale, it's going to be 22 orbits, about 6 months. What do we hope to accomplish in that amount of time?
We hope to accomplish a lot of incredible science, things that we have never been able to do before with the Cassini mission. We're going to go screaming over the top of Saturn. We'll be able to study the hexagon at Saturn's North Pole in greater detail than ever before. We're going to go shooting between Saturn and its rings, threading the needle, which means we'll be able to taste the rain particles, be able to understand learn more about what those are made of, we'll also be able to taste the atmosphere of Saturn. We're also going to get a better idea of the interior structure, since we'll be getting closer to Saturn than we've ever been. And then this will all culminate in Cassini's final plunge into Saturn's atmosphere, taking data for as long as possible and transmitting that back to Earth. To be able to do this engineering, to thread that needle between Saturn and its rings, is really challenging. That requires something called astrodynamics.
Okay, so what is astrodynamics? It's a form of engineering, but when we think about engineering typically, we think about people who are using physics and technology to build stuff. Astrodynamicists are building flight paths that will take our spacecraft to where they need to go. Let's go talk to one of the engineers who was pivotal in the design of this flight path on the Cassini spacecraft. Okay, this is Brent. He's our astrodynamicist at JPL. Brent, what makes the grand finale particularly difficult and challenging?
The grand finale is a series of 22 orbits where the periapsis, or the closest point of the orbit, is actually in this gap between the upper atmosphere of Saturn and the innermost part of the main rings. What we've done is we've designed this trajectory such that, utilizing one last Titan gravity assist, we can jump the entire ring system and place the spacecraft orbit inside this very, very small gap that's only 2,000 kilometers wide.
This concept of gravity assist, I think a lot of people have heard of it, but maybe not completely understand it.
What it essentially means is you're harnessing the gravity of a body that's orbiting another body. For Cassini, Titan, a very massive moon, is orbiting Saturn. If Cassini is also orbiting Saturn, I can fly very close to Titan. Depending if I fly in front of, or behind, or above, or below, I can use that gravity to bend my trajectory. We harness that power. It's our engine. It's our tour design engine. As soon as we do that last Titan flyby, Cassini's fate is sealed. It is going to impact Saturn no matter what.
So, some really amazing science before we take this final plunge into Saturn. And let's remember why we're doing that. Why are we flying the spacecraft into the planet? It's to protect the moons of Saturn. For example, Enceladus, this great moon that has an ocean underneath the surface, it might just be this cozy little place for microbes to live. Now, if you look at our spacecraft, we try to keep it as clean as possible, but there's a real chance that we're bringing microbes from Earth with us. There's no way to avoid it. We want the moon as pristine as possible for future missions to go exploring.
Curiosity, insight, spirit, opportunity. If you think about it, all of these names of past Mars rovers are qualities we possess as humans. We are always curious and seek opportunity. We have the spirit and insight to explore the moon, Mars, and beyond. But if rovers are to be the qualities of us as a race, we miss the most important thing. Perseverance. We as humans evolved as creatures who could learn to adapt to any situation, no matter how harsh. We are a species of explorers, and we will meet many setbacks on the way to Mars. However, we can persevere. We, not as a nation, but as humans, will not give up. The human race will always persevere into the future. My name is Alexander Mather, and that's why I chose Perseverance as the name of NASA's next Mars rover. I don't really think that there is a word in any human language that can describe the feeling of having your name selected to be part of a mission from the greatest agency in the world, doing the most important things to help humanity spread to the stars. I am 13 years old, and I did not expect that I would be making any form of impact on human space exploration like this until I was at least out of college, or maybe in an internship. And here I am, and I just named a rover. Something I submitted was chosen by people who one day I plan to work with, and that's incredible. To me, perseverance means that in the inevitable setbacks that we're going to face on the main way to Mars, humans won't give up. Humans will keep on sending new missions, humans will keep on improving technologies, and humans will eventually live on other places throughout the solar system and maybe even beyond. And that's just so important for all of our futures.
Right, we're here with Tracy in this huge room. Hello, Tracy.
Hello.
Can you tell us a little bit about the room that we're standing in?
Yes, we're here in High Bay 1, which is JPL's oldest, largest clean room where we assemble spacecraft.
Okay, and what are we standing in front of today?
We are standing in front of one of the test units for a Juno solar array. Juno's a mission that's going to Jupiter to learn more about the planet and how it was formed.
So this is a full-scale test unit, and it's one of 3 on the Juno spacecraft. Why does it have to be this big?
Jupiter is 5 times farther away from the sun than the Earth is, and the amount of sunlight you get is decreasing by the square of the distance. So instead of 1/5 the amount of power, we have 1/25 the amount of power. So we need to have a lot of area on our solar arrays because the spacecraft is so far away from the sun. And also, over the last 20 years, we've had about a 50% increase in solar array efficiency, and that makes it easier to do at that distance. If we had these solar arrays here on Earth, they would actually generate about 14 kilowatts of power. But all the way out at Jupiter, they only generate about 500 watts of power.
These things are so huge and heavy, I imagine it's a bit of a challenge to test them on Earth before you go to space.
Yeah, these solar arrays weigh about 250 pounds apiece. Here on Earth, when we tested them, we only deployed one at a time because we didn't really have a clean room facility big enough to do all 3. And we also had to do them sideways and support them on these posts with wheels on the bottom so you could gently roll them out and make sure that the hinges and the dampers and all of that were working just fine.
Juno is one of the largest spacecraft I've ever seen. How do you package that up onto a launch vehicle?
Our spacecraft is about 65 feet across, the array's deployed, and that certainly wasn't going to work. So when we launch the vehicle, it has to be folded up small enough to fit into the nose cone of the rocket. And you'll notice that the cells are on the inside, and so they wouldn't be getting any power from the sun. So that was a really interesting time for the team during launch, is knowing that we had to make sure the arrays were deployed to get sun, or the spacecraft would just have died.
All right, we're here with Nick Siegler in this very fun-looking lab. Nick, can you tell us a little bit about where we are?
Mike, we're in JPL's Starshade lab.
What exactly is a starshade used for?
Mike, there are 2 techniques that NASA is advancing to look for life on exoplanets. The starshade basically is a large shade that is flown outside of a telescope with the intention of blocking the light of the star. So then we can see the planet's light skirt the shade and captured by the telescope.
Okay, so this is much like I'm looking up at the sun and I want to see a bird or an airplane. I put my hand up to block the sun's light, but we have to do it on a much larger scale for a star.
The starshade itself is tens of meters in diameter. That's the size of a baseball diamond.
Just about how far away from the telescope would it have to fly?
It's tens of thousands of miles. You can fit like 4 Earths between the telescope and the shade. It's got its own propulsion system. It's literally its own spacecraft.
How do we get it up into space?
That's the engineering challenge, is how do we get something that has to deploy to tens of meters in diameter that could sit on top of a rocket? So now our engineers have come up with a technique based on the ancient practices of origami.
Sounds difficult. How do you know that's going to work?
Well, we do what we always do. We start small and we work our way up. So we started in this case with something just a few inches in size. Then we built something 1 meter in diameter, and we matured up to 2 meters. And now we finally got up to 5 meters. The one that flies in space is going to be tens of meters.
Okay, so you're using origami to make this really large star shade. It's a fun mechanical engineering project. But you mentioned that NASA is actually investing in 2 different technologies. What's the second technology?
That one is called the coronagraph.
The coronagraph. Can we take a look at that one?
Let's go.
Okay, Nick, this is obviously a lot different than the last lab we were in. We're in bunny suits now, trying to be super clean. Can you tell us where we are right now?
Mike, we are in JPL's High Contrast Imaging Testbed Lab. This is where we test the next generation space coronagraphs. Behind us is one of our vacuum chambers where we simulate the environment of space.
What's the big difference in approaches here?
With the starshade, we saw that the blocker was way outside of the telescope. Now, as another approach, we're going to take that huge blocker and shrink it down to the size of something that could fit in between your fingers. This way it can fit on the back end of a telescope. This particular mask is the size of a pinhead. All of that starlight has to be focused right onto that little pinhead. We want to make sure that the focused light from the star hits the sweet spot of the mask. So it's critical that we have a mechanism to control the focused light.